Aloha and welcome to today's episode of the Chiefs 9 podcast. I am Command Chief Master Sgt. Zandra Fox, the Hawaii National Guard Command Enlisted leader.
And I'm Jeff Hickman, Director of Public Affairs for the State of Hawaii Department of Defense. Welcome. Today's podcast is the Chiefs 9. You can see the logo behind me. It's the first series in our new podcast for the State of Hawaii DoD that's called Nakoa Exchange, Boots, Wings, and More. It's a brand new adventure that we're taking, and the Chiefs 9 is our first series that we're dedicating to get out to y'all. We're on multiple platforms, and we'll go over that shortly. We've recorded several episodes already on the warrior ethos, different leadership topics, time management, really good ones. And we got a special topic for you today with some special guests. Again, this is a 9-part series, but we have some bonus content. Some of our episodes go long because we talk too much and our guests have such great content. So there'll be more than just 9 on there, but you can follow the different episodes and I'll tell you where they're located in a bit.
Yeah, and so our hopes is that those that are listening get some kind of nuggets that they can apply in their organization, some aha moments, but also to share the leadership perspective of our guests of the Hawaii National Guard.
You can check us out on YouTube, YouTube Music, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So today we're recording it on video, so you'll be able to see us talking in the video portion on YouTube, but you can also, if you just want to listen to it, you have other options.
Awesome. So today is a really good episode. I'm super excited. This one's titled CSel Alumni. So with us today, we have our 2 guests, the number 6 and the number 7, former Command Enlisted leaders, Chief Master Sgt. Rob Lee and Chief Master Sgt. Will Parker. And I have with me today my co-host Jeff Hickman, Director of Public Affairs. So we're super excited to get started and dig deep into some of our conversations. And so let's go.
All right. First, if you guys can just give a short introduction, maybe tell us your guard story.
Sure. First off, mahalo for the opportunity. Retired Chief Rob Lee, number 6 as far as the CSel. I started, my first assignment was actually in the active duty Air Force. I was at McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento, and I got stationed back home to Hickam as an active duty individual working up at Maka'ala Air Force Station. So we had a sister-to-sister relationship with the National Guard up there. So I worked hand in hand with the National Guard. When it came time to do a transfer of station, I was offered a position in the Air National Guard as a dual status guardsman. So I went ahead and took that opportunity, applied for the position, interviewed, made the transfer. Back then it was called Palace Chase. And that's where I started my guard career at Maka'ala Air Force Station. That was back in '87. After about 4 years of being a traditional guardsman, working as a field engineer for a company called Tunet Hawaii, I was employed full-time with the National Guard in 1991. So I became an air technician up in Maka'ala Air Force Station in a radio relay, which is wideband communications, SATCOM communications, what it's called today, AFSC. And since then, I've been at the 169th again since 1987, became the Wing Command Chief in 2007, and then filled the biggest boots/pumps in my career when Denise Zielinski Hall became selected as the senior enlisted leader for the National Guard. So I filled her spot as the SEL back in 2010.
And those were some big boots to fill.
I was telling you, it was quite an amazing endeavor.
She set the bar really high. But
Yes,
no, that's very interesting. So you were in Maka'ala for a
About
lot of
18
years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness.
A long time. Yeah.
Chief.
So my story is a little different. So I started off active duty as well, joined in 1989. I was a heavy equipment operator, civil engineering, stationed at Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington. So I did 6 years there, and a lot of my buddies were getting orders to Hawaii. And so I was trying to go remote, do anything, because I was just wanting to PCS somewhere. So I got super frustrated and deleted my dream sheet and just put Hawaii on it, and then got deployed, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And then while I was there, I found out I got orders to Hawaii. I actually had to come back a couple weeks early from deployment so I could meet my PCS timeline. PCS to Hawaii, did 8 years here, active duty, and then the active duty said, you got to go. And so I was not excited about that. So I got orders to Kansas, McConnell Air Force Base, tanker base in the middle of nowhere. So I went there. I got deployed again. This was Iraq. So this is kind of a deployment that kind of shifted everything in my career. And got back from that deployment, and typically have your 2 weeks of downtime. And so just came home, and me and the family was miserable there. I was miserable, and we just made the decision we're going back to Hawaii. So separated active duty with about 15 and a half years. Everybody thought I had PTSD from Iraq, which I kind of did, but that really wasn't the issue. And came back to Hawaii, joined the Guard as a traditional member, and did that for about a year. Worked as a contractor during that time, and then got offered an ADR job. I remember General Osterman was the one that I was the only person who applied for the job. And so he called me into his office one day and said, yeah, I don't normally hire people when there's only one applicant, but he told me a story about we were prepping for an ORI, and I basically chewed out General Pauling after a scenario in the exercise because he took too long to put his mask on in mop gear. And I was telling him, like, sir, you're the wing commander, like, you gotta show a sense of urgency. And he goes, when I saw you chew out the wing commander, I knew you'd probably be the right guy for the job. So he hired me. So then I did that for the next 19 years total. Worked my way up, became the chief in CE, and then got offered the CSel job following Chief Rob Lee's tenure. And yeah, again, big shoes to fill. Went from the squadron to the CSel. Would not recommend anybody do that. That's kind of a big leap. So that was not my intention, but when I came to do the interview, I was kind of tricked into doing the interview by another chief, Alfred. So if you're watching, it's all your fault.
A lot of name dropping.
Yeah, no. So yeah, he actually tricked me into interviewing for the job because I wanted to shoot for the wing command chief job because that's the job I was kind of looking to do. He's like, oh yeah, but you haven't interviewed in a long time. I go, yeah, you're right, I haven't. He goes, you should probably go do the interview just as a dry run. I'm like, yeah, okay, I could do that. So when I came to the interview, I was like, I wasn't stressed about it because I was like, I'm not getting this job.
Just
practice. So, but apparently they liked what I said. So, and the rest is history.
Unfiltered,
yep.
real you.
The real me. Yep.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great. So thanks for sharing those stories. So we want to start off with our first question. In your role as the Command Senior Enlisted Leader for the Hawaii National Guard, like you talked about filling the big boots and the pumps, and your career going in from active duty to the deployment to being squadron chief, and then now going to Command Senior Enlisted Leader. I agree. I would not recommend that to anybody out there. So I'd like to start off with, what did it mean to you to be the Command Senior Enlisted Leader during your tenure?
So I know for me, I actually remember General Logan calling me at work that day. I was completely shocked when he offered me the job. I didn't even hesitate. I just said, yes, I'll take it. I hung up the phone, and then I kind of was like, what did I just do? So I called my wife and said, oh my gosh, they just offered me this job. Because honestly, I didn't have really a good understanding of what the job would be initially, because again, I was at the squadron level. I hadn't been at the group or the wing. I kind of had an idea maybe what it would be like, but hadn't really experienced all that. But obviously the whole experience was very rewarding. I mean, it has its challenges, just like many things. It's rewards, it's good days, it's bad days. But overall, I would chalk it up as like it's an experience I would not want to not have or forget about. When I look back on my career, like not being a first sergeant, just because of the timing and I guess the way my career went, it just didn't kind of work out. I kind of missed that opportunity, which I kind of wish I'd have done in the Air Guard, but it just didn't happen, which is okay. I was on track to get commissioned up until after 9/11, and then I was 2 weeks away from going to ROTC, finishing my electrical engineering degree, and getting a commission. But then stop loss happened, and nobody could leave their career fields. So little things like that just kind of change the path of your career. So you can choose to, look at that as like, oh, I guess, I can't do this, so I guess I'm done. But you just revector, and you just change directions, and you just keep going. So I looked at that as a command chief job too, probably about 3 or 4 months into it, even though, Rob was still around a little while. So I was always walking down the hall asking questions because he was still up here at headquarters for a while. But I remember when he left, And then I was like, okay, there's nobody left to answer, really ask questions to. So, there, like I said, there are days that were hard, but I mean, I value the friendships and the relationships and the challenges, because really, in my mind, doing hard things, doing difficult things is what helps shape you as a person, is what helps shape you as a leader. Because getting through those hard and difficult things is what really matters, and making progress. You're not always successful in maybe what you try to do. Maybe you're trying to help people or overcome a problem, a situation, whatever. But at least going through it and progressing, and just never stopping and never letting it stop you from progressing.
Yeah. So you had some form of resiliency in the times of being uncertain. Like, where do you go from here? Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
What a great attitude to have.
Yeah.
When confronted with a big change that a lot of people would have quit and gone in a different direction, and it took you to the highest enlisted position in the White Guard.
But it sounds like he didn't know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You like definitely going in with uncertainty, like,
And it was
awesome.
it was never like that was my aspiration, right? It was
Right.
never like I was like, oh, I'm shooting for this. My attitude was just always whatever position or whatever rank I held. I think it was more the position and responsibility I had. I was always like, my attitude was like, I'm just going to do the best I can do at whatever this position is I have. Because I remember when I transitioned to the Guard, that first year as a traditional member, I was working a full-time job, but I would come in after I would get off my full-time job, and I would do like the 4 hours of PT time, and I would do that like 2-3 times a week. So usually like Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which my wife wasn't super excited about. But I would come in and I would be in the Guard, and I'd work till 8 o'clock at night, because I was really just trying to understand and absorb the Guard culture. Like, how are we doing? Because I quickly realized coming off active duty, even though we do a lot of things the same, there's a lot of things we do different in the Guard. So that transition was pretty hard. So, yeah.
Well, just to let you know, as a soldier in the Hawaii Guard, under your, when you were your tenure, I couldn't tell that you took the job without having the first sergeant or wing. So you did it. You appeared like you knew what you were doing, and there was no fault in that. So
That's good.
that's yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a wild ride when you really think about it. Looking back in hindsight, for me, I was the chief out at the 169th. I was the maintenance CEM, and one drill weekend, I got a visit from 2 command chiefs that came into my office, and suddenly they're like, "Hey, the landscape's going to change here in the leadership structure, and we're looking at you to be interested in possibly fulfilling the wing command chief position. We'd like you to consider applying." So, after some heavy thought that weekend, because at the 169, we're really on our own island out there. We're away from the main campus. So we kind of not do our own thing, but we're just isolated in that regard. So that was, to me, going from a small little pond to the big ocean kind of jump. Wasn't sure if I was really ready for it, but I took the advice again on the confidence that these folks had in me to go ahead and apply. And I did get selected. And I was mentored by one of the best mentors you could ever have, and that was Chief Jelinski Hall. She took me under her wing as the Hyang and the command chief for the National Guard. And she ensured that I was involved in everything and understood, what the job entailed and what our kuleana was as far as taking care of our airmen, and at her level, her soldiers too. Couldn't ask for a better scenario, really, to be set up, in such a positive way. I will tell you, it tempered me in the sense of, being, again, isolated in a little pond, and you see some of the problems that are up at those levels, and you always ask yourself, what can I do to help to make things better? Because there's a lot of frustration. We had a lot of PACAF issues at the 169, funding-wise. So there's those things like, man, we need the money to do this, that, and 9/11 changed that to a certain degree. But again, getting up to the wing at that level, and again, being tempered with the understanding that this is the platform that if that position ever becomes available as an opportunity to become the command SCL, then I will use this as a learning opportunity. And again, using my greatest resource, which is Chief Chilinski Hall, to make sure I understood, what I was getting into. So that transition was much easier for me than definitely for Chief Parker here. But one of the challenges, again, is always what can we do to make things better? How can we lead with aloha, be impactful, be passionate, and always try to do the right thing? That was really my mantra is the aloha acronym really is to make sure that we understand what our responsibility is, to lead with that and make sure everybody buys into it. Whether you're an officer or an enlisted, we're all one team, right? So ALOHA leadership is something that is much different than you can find anywhere else, I think. And that's something I want to perpetuate throughout the National Guard. So that's one of the things that I felt was a calling when I became the CSel. Humbly accepting that position.
Two very different paths.
Yeah, amazing. Chief Jelinski Hall actually reached out to me when I became the number 9 CSel and just really offered her service and say, if you need something, let me know. And I was able to get to know her in that way. So that it's nice to know you have that support system of fellow chiefs that you can call and be like, I just don't know what to do. So I think that's amazing. Yeah.
So we heard how you got there. We heard a little bit about your history. What's some of the challenges as CSel that you faced during your tenure?
I think right off the bat, those boots pumps were now empty. She's gone. She's up at the bureau, phone call away. But still, the kuleana again now rests on the current CSel's shoulders. My first thing was building relationships, not knowing the Army National Guard that well. Being able to dive in and understand their mission, their people, what is their mantra, what makes them click. And I will tell you, and I tell this in candid conversations or public ones that I get invited to speak, I became a fan of the Army really quick because I've understood being on deployments myself, watching the Army deploy, get in and out. They get in, they do their job, they get out like nobody was there. So I was super amazed at how they could do that with such a big amount of people. The Air Guard, our side, we do it very well too, but at a very different type and way of doing it. So big fan of that, which made it much easier to get into all the different units just to learn about them as people, about their mission, what makes them grow and click. And that to me was the most fascinating thing, being the CSel. And if it wasn't for the support of my leadership, General Wong, my second adjutant general I worked for General Lee first for about 10 months. And then I worked for General Wong. They both made it a priority to ensure that the enlisted was always included in everything that we were doing. So they invite me to all the different meetings, a seat at the table, even internationally. When we would travel, they would always make sure that his chief's chair was ready for me to sit. And they'd invite the international E9 to come too, so we would be at the table. Whether it was a dinner or a conference or a meeting, we were always included. And I thought that was so impactful. It made my ability to lead much, much easier. Being able to be in rooms where not necessarily have a voice, but I could hear, listen, learn, and share. And I was always given the green light to share that information, which I thought was huge, again, for the enlisted force. So I made it a point to connect those dots, build those bridges, and make sure I funneled information out to the masses as often as I could, so they were all being inclusive, just like how I was being included.
Yeah, it's a big step to go from Haiyang to Hing, and you have to learn the whole Army side. But that was good that you had a tag that supported the NCO.
Yeah, and you understanding learning the other component and the things that they have to offer, that's really important. And I would agree with you, building that relationship, because then it builds the trust and the credibility for you in that role as a CSel.
Challenges?
Yeah. So, which one do you pick? Um, well, I guess in an event, in a situation like this, you want to try to highlight the ones that you think will maybe have the most impact to somebody listening, right? Um, so again, coming from the position I came from, the squadron level up to the command senior enlisted level, is kind of a big jump. I was a little shocked actually at the lack of jointness that we kind of had when I got to this level, to be honest. Because because when you hear like higher headquarters, the hang, Army Guard, Air Guard, you think, oh, up there, like everybody must communicate and work and gel. And I got up here and realized, well, it's not quite that way in every arena. So that was a little shocking. But I was the same as Chief Lee. I mean, my first goal is like, I don't understand what the Army Guard really does here in Hawaii. So going to all those unit visits and really getting immersed in their mission and understanding their mission. I had worked a lot with the Army when I was deployed to Iraq, 2003, 2004, because they had BOSSI of Balad Air Base. There was LSA Anaconda when we got there, because we were the first Air Force people to roll in. So I had experience working with the Army, like in the field. They're on the tactical side, so I kind of understood their concepts. But it's a little different when you're back here in garrison at home, because the Army's really just focused on training. We're just training every single day, which is kind of the same thing the Air Guard does, but differently. We train, but we're also doing real world missions every single day for the Air Force, because that's just the way the Guard operates. So getting to understand the Guard mission, go out there shaking hands and meeting people and letting them know, hey, I'm the command senior enlisted leader, General Logan, Army tag. I'm a senior enlisted, so I represent both sides of the fence. So I really want to understand what challenges, issues you guys have and what I can help with on the enlisted side. And the same way that Chief Lee talked about, I was always included, which I appreciated. I think some of the other people in the meeting didn't always appreciate that, because sometimes I would be the only enlisted person sitting in a room with a bunch of other general officers and officers discussing issues. And when I was asked my opinion, I'm very frank, very, not disrespectful, but I would tell the story. And I didn't have an issue disagreeing with somebody across the table, politely, but that didn't always go over well. But I think that's one of the reasons General Logan hired me, because that's the way I interviewed during the interview. So, because I asked him, I think it was like 18 months into the job, and I was getting really frustrated with some things. And I just remember going into his office one day and just asking him, I was like, General Logan, why did you hire me for this job? Because I just felt like I was just, banging my head against a wall so much. And he told me a couple of reasons, and he's like, one of the reasons is because he's like, I could tell when you interviewed, like what you were saying was just, that's you. You weren't putting on a facade. You weren't trying to say the right answer. You just told the answer like you felt. And he goes, I appreciate that impression, because he said, as a tag, he needs somebody to be able to tell him the truth. When the baby looks ugly, tell me the baby looks ugly, right? Yeah, sometimes. So the lack of jointness was a little challenging initially. So I think we've made big strides in overcoming a lot of that. I think in Rob Lee's tenure, we were doing a lot of that in the joint staff, and then we helped to build on that some more. Because the Air Guard, they have a hard time participating in the joint stuff, only not because they don't want to, but because they have so many requirements to do day to day. Because they're not like where the Army's, their units are basically, hey, we'll pull you in and let's train and prepare for what if. The Air Guard's like, yeah, we're actually doing missions. So then when the state calls upon us to come do something, it's like, it's a little different, because we're like, well, we're already doing this federal mission over here, so we can't necessarily afford to go do the state or the joint mission as much as the Army can. And so that causes some division a lot of times between the two services. So I looked at one of my goals as trying to help socialize and educate people on both sides of the fence about those challenges, because we just have different mission sets, right? The Army has a mission, the Air has a certain mission, and they're both needed. We just have to learn to gel and work them together as best we can. So I really looked at my position as trying to help bring as much of that together as you could, and really deconflict at the higher levels the lack of knowledge on both sides. Because I was actually too kind of surprised that a lot of the senior Air people and Army people, they don't understand what each other does necessarily, because they don't spend all that time doing unit visits like the tag does. with the senior enlisted, right? Which is something we brought up, and we did a few of those where we'd bring like a bunch of air senior leaders and we would take them out to an Army visit, and you could see what the Army's doing. And vice versa, we'd take a bunch of Army people over to the Air Guard side so they could see what they're doing. So it's not when you become the TAG or the director of staff or the chief of staff or the command senior enlisted leader, this is your first exposure to it. You should be exposed to it at a lower level so you're better prepared. Because I know for me that was a big hurdle to overcome initially.
I think being air CSels, challenge of having to learn the new component. We are definitely a lot better with our jointness. We don't spell joint ARMY anymore. So we are seeing strides in those relationship buildings. And I think just being open to learning like what each does. And like you said, inviting the different components. We've done Hing SEL meet and greets where Army and Air come together. And now they built that relationship and that partnership on who to call and understanding each other's capabilities. So with your challenges that you guys have had, what are some positive impacts you believe you've made as your role when you were the Command Senior Enlisted leader?
I think, again, it was connecting, building relationships, because when you come to the table and if that's your objective, what you're really trying to do is gain trust for the future. Because once you make that connection and have an understanding of where you're at, where I'm at, where we can be, where we were and where we should be, then that, really is the recipe for success, I think. Because this starts with where rubber meets the road, relationships. And there's a lot of building of those that needs to be done. And that's primarily because of the unknown, right? Like Chief Parker here is explaining, the differences between the two mission sets, just the mindsets that are much different. And then the inability or the non-opportunities of being able to experience those, that cross relationships. So it takes time, that's for sure. But I think the first thing is always having that earnest discussion with an open heart and mind to connect, regardless of, who's sitting across the table with you. Because it's not about those at the table. It's about those that are in the organization and at a broader picture, the state of Hawaii, and then the nation, quite honestly.
Definitely bigger than yourself, right? Yeah, for sure. How about you, Chief Parker? What positive impacts do you believe you've made
positive
within the
impact.
Hawaii National Guard in your role as the Command Senior Enlisted leader?
So one of the things I know, Rob Lee, he had I can't remember the name of that organization you started. NACOA, yeah. So they would go out and do these cultural team building events, and I thought that was really, really good. And he still continued that after he was Command Senior Enlisted leader. So I didn't kind of want to necessarily duplicate what he was already doing. But I put on we did a couple of joint senior NCO conferences, just one day events, but we brought all the like E7 and up. So the senior NCOs from the Army Guard and the Air Guard side who wanted to volunteer to come spend a day. So the first one was a little chaotic. We learned some lessons, but it's still good. And then I think the second one we made a lot better. But it was really, because again, going back to that point of, it shouldn't be like I'm a senior master sergeant, I'm an E8 or now I'm an E9, and this is my first taste of doing something joint in the Hawaii Guard, right? Like either working on a JTF, doing state active duty for the lava flow on the Big Island, or, just pick a disaster we did. So really the onus of that joint senior show was really to get the senior shows together on both sides so they could just talk story, get to know each other, right? Because those people at those levels which are really like the movers and shakers within the organization, because those are the ones that are empowered to do the mission, because they're mentoring all their junior NCOs under them. They're helping to execute the officers' vision and direction at their units, but the Army Guard and those Air Guard senior NCOs don't necessarily collaborate or cross paths that often. So that was what I was trying to get the point across to most of them. And so we got a lot of positive feedback because they're like, oh, we've never done this before. And I had no clue. I hear the Air guys go, I had no clue the Army did this. And the Army guys like, I had no clue the Air Guard did this. And it's like, I've been in the Guard for 15 years. I didn't know you guys did this. So that I think that was a big success. And so that was what I really endeavored to do, is to try to bring the organization together. And I guess the other positive things is, one of the things I did not realize is the amount of personnel issues you deal with at this level, right? And it's like every other day I'm walking down the hall to HR about something, a DSG, an AGR, enlisted officer, whatever. Sometimes on my own, sometimes because of the direction of the commanders. So you have to learn a lot of the rules and policies on both sides, right? Because they're fairly similar, but there's little nuance difference between the Army and the Air. So really, and the struggle was trying to keep our own organization kind of honest and true to our existing policies and laws. Because sometimes people within our organization were trying to do things to some of their people, and we weren't following our own policy and guidelines. So you have to really be smart on all that, which I'm not, so I really have to rely on the experts, which are the HR people, which is why you have to lean on them pretty heavy. But one thing I liked is the fact that I was able to intervene, because normally when somebody walks into the CSel office because they have a problem, they're usually at that critical tipping point, and you hear their story and you're like, wow, that's okay. I wish you'd come talk to me 5 months ago, because now they're like, it's like 2 weeks away from something catastrophic happening. But one of the things I remember back there, there's a handful of people that I was able to assist and help, and basically help them get through a very difficult time in their career. Some of them trying to get kicked out or disciplined for things, and a myriad of things, and other people just having challenges within their careers or their lives. And a lot of these people I still communicate with today, because once you help somebody at that level, kind of has an impact. And so not only do they not forget you, you don't forget them, because you're like, hey, we really went through this thing together, and both of us came out better for it. So we still remember it. So those are the things I like to think back and look on, that I'm like, I had a positive impact.
It's amazing. That theme of interweaving through the both of your experiences is really just building relationships. And taking care of people is really what the role is for. So
It sounds like there's a lot of learning involved. All of you are Air. I was Army, and I would do something at the Joint Staff, and I didn't understand why there was no Air in the either the personnel, operations, logistics. Where are the Air people? And I had to learn that, as an officer at that level too. So it's anybody who gets to that level, it's like they should have learned it earlier. That's a really good point and a good mission to do. So having those meetings, building the relationships, and as an Army person, seeing you go to the units where we get to kind of show off our Army stuff, it was enjoyable for us.
yeah,
And it meant something to those units when you came out. So all your command visits that you guys did, it does have an impact.
yeah. You get comments a lot, and I think it's a nice story about, or how a discussion, open discussion when they see your Air. So it's like a great talking point into like discussing the role, who you are. It's like a perfect segue. So I use that a lot of the times when I go to an Army event. They're like, wait a minute, but you're Air Force. So now it's my time to inform and educate them on what a Command Chief is. I wear this. I'm in a joint position. So I think that's an advantage when you're not Army. So
It's nice we all wear the same uniform now.
right,
Yeah.
just the only difference is this. Yeah,
Not you guys, though. When you were in.
Yeah.
You went through a couple
Yeah,
changes.
so I went through that.
Really?
I went through that transition. I think it was 2016 when we transitioned to the OCP. So
Yep.
yeah, I think a lot of the Air people were kind of actually happy about that, because we like this uniform better than the old ABUs.
Did you wear the blue one? The one that made us look like a blueberry? Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah.
I forget what that one was called.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one wasn't good. But
I actually came in.
yeah,
I was part of the first flight and basic training for the Air Force that got issued BDUs. All the people before me still got issued the fatigue greens. So when I showed up to my first duty station, active duty, I looked like nobody. I was the only airman, no stripes. I came in with 0 stripes as an E1, and they were all making fun of me when I walked in the shop. I can still remember this plain as day when I walked into my shop, because there's a heavy equipment shop at Fairchild's huge. There's like 50 military people and like 50 civilians. It was huge. And they're all just like, oh, look at that kid. He looks so funny. And I'm like, what? Because I just came from base training. I'm like, we all dress like this. And then I get to my first base and I'm like, nobody has this uniform.
Mhm.
I only have it. So, yeah,
Wow. First for everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
it's kind of weird.
So we're kind of running long on time. So I want to get to a question. What lessons did you learn on the job that you could use in the future, or you use in the civilian life, or your next position? So is there something from the CSel position that you took elsewhere?
Well, when I retired from the National Guard and when I relinquished my responsibility, uh, my next transition was into a state position. So I went to work for Governor Ige for about a year as his protocol officer. And then from there, I transitioned to DOT Airports, worked for the deputy director. And then from there, I went to Southwest Airlines as their operations station manager and brought in the Hawaiian market. And then my final sort of job was at the Hawaii State Veteran Cemetery as the operations manager out there. There is so much that I took from not only my career, but the last, 7 years of my enlisted senior leader career. And that, again, the fabric of building relationships, understanding more, being more insightful as having foresight. It trained me really well on how to predict what could and what may or may not be. So those are the kind of things that helps you look around the corner. And in my post careers, that helped me immensely in understanding that landscape. Not to mention, again, the relationships that I had built while being in the National Guard, because everywhere I went, this island is so small. Everybody knows everybody. And the first thing that everybody would say when they see me, oh, you're with the National Guard. So it was that career that launched me into being able to do those things for my post-employment. But again, taking away just the full body experience of the National Guard in relationships, meeting, overcoming, even failing in some of our endeavors grew me. So even as a young soldier airman, if they were to, I coached football for many years. A lot of my kids, Pop Warner, joined the military. And when their parents came to me and said, they want to join the National Guard, I always made it a point to go sit down with those kids, get the family together, and I would tell them and the parents that this is the best decision you'll ever make. It won't make you rich, but you'll be rich inside. And today I can boast that there's got to be at least a dozen kids that are in our military services locally here, just based off of wanting to be better people in our society here. So again, reflecting back, the whole experience has just been great.
Add
Very
recruiter to the title.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Oh, yeah,
That's
we're all
great.
recruiters.
Yeah.
It's our experiences, right, that really shape
Yeah.
what we believe in,
So awesome.
Yeah,
Very grateful.
I would agree.
So yeah, so I would say, the bulk of my military career, even though I started out as a reserve, I did emergency management for about 18 years. So in the Air Force, emergency management, your whole job is prepare for disasters, right? And then in the wartime, we do all the wartime stuff. So you learn in that career field, you have to learn to how do you remain calm in the midst of a chaotic event, right? Because typically in emergency management in the Air Force, you're like overseeing an emergency operations center. You're managing herding all these cats and dogs that come in during a time of contingency or an emergency and trying to get them all moving in the right direction to overcome whatever disaster we're getting ready to handle, right? So from that aspect, coming up, that helped a lot in this job. But again, I think the one thing that I paired with that is I always understood the Air Force mission. I kind of understood, I'd worked with the Army, not necessarily the Navy, the Marines so much. When I came into this position and we did a lot of the international traveling, the visits, and really trying to build relationships with our foreign partners, working at the Indo-PACOM level, so our combatant command level, really opened my eyes to how critical the Guard and the Reserve are for the overall military mission to meet their requirements in any COCOM, not just the COCOM we sit in here, because it's, we're kind of unique here in Hawaii because we're literally sitting in our COCOM's backyard, right? This is our theater. Now, absent when we were at war for 20 plus years, a lot of people deployed over there. Very few people lived there. Almost no Guard and Reserve lived in that theater. Everybody had to deploy there. So we're kind of unique here in Hawaii where we get to reside here. And so we're very intertwined into that mission set. So I think our ability to do that and have an effect on the bigger picture, and how a lot of times maybe necessarily the Army Guard or the Air Guard down at that battalion, unit, squadron level doesn't really understand how their little mission footprint, which is, well, it's not really little, but what they do, how much of an impact it makes in like the Indo-PACOM mission and objectives that we're doing in this great power competition right now. So that really opened my eyes a lot. And what I realized a lot of times is, I would make recommendations based on just my tunnel vision of just Air Force or Air National Guard, right? And so sitting in this job really opened my visors to like, wow, there's really a very significant Marine and Navy, Coast Guard, international partners and allies, foreign countries, all these other people play such a huge role in all of us being successful. And I think, because today I retired last June, but now I'm back as a contractor working up at headquarters PACAF in civil engineering, kind of what my field of expertise is. Still doing a lot of these programs, so I still do this today. So even though I'm a contractor now, and it's kind of funny because I'm still in the same building where I was wearing a uniform, so everybody still calls me Chief. And then people walk in and they're like, "You have a contractor badge. Why is everybody calling you Chief?" So I'm still kind of engrossed in a lot of that today. So I still see the effects of that, and so that experience from that CSel is what I've carried on further on down the road. So it's kind of interesting because I was supposed to retire in 2019 when I was done as a CSel. That was always the plan, June of 2019. But then a former boss reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in going and doing MPA days up at PACAF? Because we're trying to do this, integration of the Guard and the reserves into the PACAF theater." And so he's like, I can guarantee you like a year, probably 2 years of orders. If this something be like, and I was like, it was something different, kind of in my lane. And honestly, I didn't feel like I was kind of ready to retire yet. I wasn't really looking forward to retiring yet. So I was like, yeah, I'll go try it. So took off to the Star, back to a Chief, and went and did MPA orders. And then COVID hit. And so spent 6 months not working from home when it initially happened. Yeah. And then an opportunity came for me to go back to my old Guard CE squadron because they were having a lot of manpower issues. So when I did that for a little while, helped so that felt good to go back to the squadron level because I know, probably talked to Rob Lee, some of our most rewarding experiences is down at those lower levels, right? Where you feel like you have the biggest impact of like really helping the mission and the people. Not that being a CSel doesn't, it's just at a different level. So got to do that again, and then PACAF needed help again, so I ended up going back up to PACAF. So I ended up doing another 4 years, so, but then I guess, Air Guard leadership decided, okay, you got 34 years, you should probably retire now. Yeah, time to go. So finally left, but now I'm still, kind of still doing the same kind of things I was doing before, just not in uniform, which honestly has been a very difficult transition for me. Because as a contractor, I don't have authority. I can't obligate the government. I can't direct anybody. But yet, they still give me all these programs and responsibilities like I'm a chief. But then I'm like, but I can't make these decisions now because I can't represent the government. So it's a little bit different. But the ethics hasn't changed. The work ethic, the way I approach things. And I think the active duty 06 I work for at headquarters PACAF was very adamant about having me back as a contractor because they hired 4 contractors at the same time and said, I'm not taking any of them unless Parker comes with them. Because he, in some arenas, I'm kind of a bulldog and I just don't give in to certain things. So I challenge people's decision-making processes and things, which I always did as a CSel, which Most times served me well, sometimes did not. I know, I have a story about that, but that'll probably be another thing.
So you
Yeah,
can't make
another
E10,
episode.
right? So
Yeah, you can't make
might as well go
E10.
all out, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it sounds very consistent, though. You didn't
you didn't waver.
change.
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, you stayed true to
You're
yourself.
you're sure you knew you know convictions were there, and so I think people appreciate that being
Yeah.
genuine and that honest and true.
And I will say there were times that my convictions where I thought I needed to go, it ended up being wrong, to be honest. Like, because the information I knew at the time, I was like, okay, yeah, we need to go do this. And then I find, you start going down that path and you realize, oh, that wasn't the right way to go. But that was okay. I wouldn't necessarily get discouraged. I would get frustrated. Like, okay, I went down the wrong path, but I would just adjust and be like, all right, let's go this way now. And I think that's the one thing that frustrated me the most as a CSel is some of the other people I would work with. They would go down that path and they would get to a point like, oh yeah, this is wrong, but we're already on the path. We're going to keep going. And I'd be like, no, we don't need to keep going down this path if we know it's wrong. Like, like we shouldn't keep a bad apple just because the bad apple's been here for a long time, right? Those are some things we should not do. So those are some of the things that frustrated me as a CSel when I couldn't convince people, like, let's not continue going down the wrong road. Let's make a course adjustment and try to go down the right road for the betterment of the organization.
No, amazing. So I think we're going to wrap up. A lot of great information, but the themes that I've heard today and the way your leadership is leading with an open heart, an open mind, that strategic vision, that jointness, the importance of relationships, learning from our experiences that just make us better within the military, and how you both have applied that to your current season in life, or your chapter, as you will. And it's just amazing experiences. And I learned a lot, and I really wish that I would have probably reached out and said, hey, can you help me lead me? Because I was a squadron chief, went to state, and then went to CSel. It is not highly recommended, but just know like it can be done if we look at our guys' experiences. So don't ever hold yourselves back out there, whoever might be listening. But I want to thank you both, the number 6 Chief Master Sergeant Rob Lee, and the number 7 Chief Master Sergeant Will Parker, for being here today. I know you guys are probably busy in retirement life, maybe, I don't know. But thank you so much for being with us here today on our podcast series, The Chiefs 9. Mahalo, Jeff, as my co-host, and Andy behind the camera there working out the sound. I am Chief Fox. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Chiefs 9 series. Until next time, aloha.